This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Joined today by Randy Brown from Alaska's Fish and Game Agency. And Randy, I'm gonna embarrass you a little bit, but not bad. It's in the kind of way you want to be embarrassed, where you hear a bunch of good stuff about yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, not where you hear stuff bad about yourself. It's good stuff.
You do know it's Fish and Wildlife Service.
Oh,
Federal Fish and Wildlife Service.
Because that's where my brother works.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
why he. Okay. I don't know. I'm sorry about that. That was Corinne's problem. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and that helps. That's a good tee into why Randy's here. My brother Danny, who works for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, has never once in his life made a recommendation of someone that should come on the podcast. Ever. I don't want to say he's stingy with respect, but he just he called me and said, you know who you need to have on this show is Randy Brown. Because he, in the 70s, moved up and lived in the bush in Alaska and lived off the land up in the Yukon and ate a strict meat diet, raised his kids up there, had all these adventures, later decided to become a fisheries biologist, got himself educated, is doing all this cutting-edge work on these kind of mysterious fish in Alaska. He's like, that's who you should be talking to. I had to convince you to do it.
Yeah, you did.
So thanks for coming down, man.
Hey, you bet.
Yeah, I wish we had you here for two shows, because I want to do one show about living in the bush, living off the land in the bush, then want to do another show about fish.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to condense it. You know?
Well, I'm amenable to it.
Okay. We got to do two quick things. A couple quick things before we get there. One, man, you weren't here for it, but we had this guy on about quail. People got mad about that. So, I don't know if you know about this, Randy, but down here, there's a huge problem with bobwhite quail just vanishing across their range.
I didn't know that.
A host of problems with bobwhite quail. So we had a guy in who had developed, it's like a dewormer. They have a high parasite loads in some areas, particularly in Texas. They have a high parasite load. So a guy comes in, we called the episode, What Happened to the Bobwhite Quail? A guy comes in, he's like, oh, there's all kinds of things that are happening to bobwhite quail. One of them is a high parasite load. So he gets the first FDA-approved drug for wildlife that is publicly available, meaning any Joe Blow can buy this quail feed with a dewormer in it. Okay. And you can put it out and try to reduce parasite loads in your quail. And he has found anecdotally and otherwise through research that it's helpful to quail in some areas where they have high parasite loads to deworm them. But man, oh man, oh man, the whole quail world's very upset that he came on, because they're like, it distracts from the main message of habitat. I disagree, because he talked about habitat a whole bunch. But anyways, we're going to have another quail. We're going to have a better quail. Not a better. We're going to have a different quail person on to explain why it's bad. Among other things, it'll be like, that episode will be called What Really Happened to the Bobwhite Quail? And in it, I will press the individual to explain why it's bad to deal with. If there's a big problem with 10 parts to it, why it's bad to deal with one of those parts.
Yeah. I'm guessing that the ratio between the size of parts is going to be.
Dude, I'm not doing a great job of articulating all of the consternation. Because, yeah, a lot of consternation in the quail world. What was the world before we found was... Remember we talked about there was a world... Oh! The beekeeping world. Beekeepers get
Oh, very, very
Yeah.
particular and
Yeah.
sensitive.
And that was the first time we ever weighed in on the Bob White Quail. So we're gonna have a follow-up episode about Bob White Quail, and we're gonna talk about that Bob White Quail episode. Quick question from to put to the people in the room. This is from a fellow named Christian. So check this out. What state's he in?
New York.
Oh, okay. He's in New York. He gets this is a letter. He's 33 years old. Odd that he told us that. He's 33 years old and owns 30 acres. Maybe he likes it how close his age is to his acreage. It says, I'm 33 years old and own 30 acres with his brother in upstate New York. His father bought the land in the 80s. He said, here's his letter, here's his question, here's his ethical conundrum. Over the last few years, we've been dealing with a landowner who owns the property next to us who is strongly against hunting. Now, keep in mind, these guys have owned this place since the 80s, okay? While we are respectful neighbors and hunt by the book, she harasses us every year. Do you have any suggestions on how to deal with such an issue? So, on the day before the opener of New York's gun season, he receives this text. He cleaned out the names because he doesn't want the person to get harassed. His name and her name, he cleaned the names out. This is in New York State. She texts him on the eve of the opener, of the deer opener. Good morning. Here we go again, much to my dismay. You are back to kill the deer. Oh, sorry. You are back to kill the deer I love and for whom I provide a sanctuary that for you becomes a killing field. It is a nightmare for me. So before you tell me not to text you again, I'd like to remind you that we share a property boundary. I encourage the presence of deer, and you can take advantage of this. It is not right. And as we still live in a partially civil society, I'm asking you with all civility to please stay off my land and not take advantage of the preponderance of deer that are here because I provide protection and a sanctuary for them. Best wishes.
I'm so curious about what her sanctuary looks like.
She signed off with best wishes?
And started with good morning and ended with best wishes.
Yeah. Seems pretty civil.
But but he's not moving on to her property. He's on his property.
He's not on her
And
property.
it seems like she's been doing this kind of thing for a while before you tell me not to text you again.
Right, yeah.
I think Janis had the right approach. We talked about it earlier.
What's that?
Lay it on us.
Oh, maybe just go pay her a visit with a warden on your hip. And,
Well, she hasn't done anything illegal.
Just have a chat with her. Well, unless I don't know at what point it becomes hunter harassment.
A text that begins good morning and ends best wishes to a neighboring property is not harassment. She didn't threaten them.
No, it wouldn't be in there going to like threaten to put her in jail. Just have the warden give her a little like education.
If this is all she's doing is sending texts like this, then Christian should just reply to her and say, hey, we're not going to go on your property. We're going to continue hunting. We do everything by the law, etc., and it's over and done.
Yeah.
But if there's something more than what we're seeing here, because we're getting just a little snippet of this world, then I would say go and pay her a visit.
For sure. But I would think at this point, I feel at this point, it's like no one wants to get that text. But, I mean, she's asking him to do something. He just would reply and say,
respectfully.
I mean, Janis,
I respectfully
I'm going to
no.
hunt my property. Thank you very much.
I respect your private property. But I'm going to use my property in accordance with the law, and I expect that you'll behave in accordance with the law.
Mhm.
And sorry that we don't see eye to eye on this.
Janis had
and then I'd say, have you seen any biggins?
Yeah, it'd make you not want to hunt that border though, because you'd be all worried about a deer running onto her property.
If it runs onto her place,
then
you're
you'd
screwed.
be in,
and he's only got
30.
He's only got 30 acres.
Yeah.
So I mean, not only that's great, it's more than I got, but not more than Yanni's got.
That's a nice chunk for back east.
Well, I feel like Janis has some experience here that most of us don't with the psychological burden that overbearing neighbor can put on you.
That's right.
So if there is more here, because it just weighs on you, you're like, oh, yeah, Every shot that goes off, I'm going to get a text. Every truck that comes up our driveway, I'm going to get a text. Every, that
Janis
does suck.
had that very similar situation around a raccoon. So he's scarred. That's why he's ready to get the law.
He's ready to throw down.
Yeah, if this lady's giving him heartburn, it's like.
Here's another listener question. My official answer. I mean, I don't know. If it sounds like from around the room. No, Yanni wants to get a game warden and go over there.
Yeah, put
like
some
a
fear in
preemptive.
her.
He wants to do a preemptive strike.
I like it.
Yanni proposes a preemptive strike. I propose saying, sorry, we don't see eye to eye.
I could see just doing nothing also.
Yep.
Just go on with your life
Definitely
like it never
justifiable
happened.
to do nothing.
Yeah.
Definitely justifiable to do nothing. Yeah, that's totally fair. Here's another question. Listener question. We got to talking recently about pre-chewing deer meat to give to your kids. Like when all of our kids, when they turned, like pretty much the day they were 9 months old, I would chew up deer meat and give it to them. Just as like a thing, like a symbolic gesture. And then they would start eating meat at that point. I don't know what they say nowadays. This stuff always changes, but a decade ago, you're supposed to give them meat at 9 months, or they could chew up meat at 9 months.
Randy, does that apply when you're living out in the bush in Alaska?
Well, I'll tell you what we did is take moose ribs that had been boiled up so nice and soft, and I'd give it to the kids, and they would chew on it just like the dogs chew on it.
At
They
what
loved
age?
it.
No meat.
Yeah, well, there's some meat,
Some
but
meat.
not a bunch.
Yeah.
But do you know roughly what age?
Well, they were still riding in a backpack for me.
Okay.
I took them around with a jerry pack,
Yeah.
and they loved it. I had two hands to work with, and they got to look at everything.
Sitting back there gnawing on ribs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if they dropped them, the dogs would take them.
So this guy's wondering, he just shot a deer. Okay, he's a new father, so he had his first kid, shot his first deer with lead ammunition, and now he's wondering if it's okay to have his kid and his wife eat it, because he's worried about the lead. Come on. Like, no. First off, when you cut it, just cut around the wound mark, cut around the wound, and then go satisfy your curiosity that when people look at lead levels, there's not any evidence that hunters that eat a lot of deer meat have elevated levels of lead. There's also a lot of things about inert lead and lead that's like in shot form, but just cut around it. I mean, plus, if you go and buy, what makes you think the stuff you're buying is so like different? I mean, okay, I don't want to feed them that, but we're gonna eat big ocean fish.
Man, if it's really weighing on them, just make the switch to copper bullets or tungsten shot for small game, whatever. Like,
sure, that's the other solution.
If it's bugging you that much.
But I would cut around it, and I mean that's the main thing we eat. The main thing we eat.
Yeah.
I got a whole bag full of all the lead shot we pulled out of birds.
Yeah.
You know what I'm gonna do with that?
Reload it?
No, a woman. I was at this event. We did this book event, and a woman came and she had this pendant that was like a dish, and it was full of all kinds of shot. And I was admiring it, and it was all the shot from her first turkey. And her and her husband sent me a kit to make them. So I'm taking all the shot we've ever picked out all of our food, because I always put it in a bag, and I'm making my wife a necklace. And it's got like this resin. So you take the dish, and you put all the shot in the dish, and it's like a pendant. And then you squirt this resin in there, and then hold a black light on it, and it makes like a necklace of all the shot you picked out of your food.
That's cool.
Does your wife know she's getting this?
Oh yeah, I've told her about 10 times. Just haven't made it yet. I got enough for 2 necklaces, so I'm gonna have one for my wife and one for my daughter.
There's another person who wrote in about pre-chewed food. He says that his mom was a dentist, and when he himself had a kid, his mom was like, no, don't do the pre-chewed food thing, or a dental hygienist, because she said cavities develop. I don't think the logic is sound, but cavities develop because of bacteria. So if you take food and you chew it up and then you give it to your kid, that might increase their likelihood of developing cavities because
But
you're
all their teeth are
introducing
gonna
different
fall.
bacteria. So
all their baby
that's-
teeth are going to fall out anyway.
That's why I didn't put it in the notes because I thought that
Well,
was
at
like
that
it
age,
didn't
they
make
barely-
any sense.
Yeah, at that
you know,
age, they
everything
barely
is
have any
bacteria.
teeth, and there's nothing on your mom's mouth that isn't getting on you.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. That's why I didn't include it, but I thought I'd.
I
bring
think
it
the
up anyway.
pre-chewing food thing has been played out. We need to move on.
Well, with that said,
At least until we get another email.
Or put it on a T-shirt.
so Randy, what drew you to Alaska, man? Like, how'd you wind up in Alaska? Where'd you grow up, and what drew you up there?
So I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so those Southern Rockies were my stomping ground as a kid. Used to fish, and, it was more like hunting for those little rainbows up in the headwaters.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I don't know, I just wanted to live out in the woods. I'd read some of these, books like The Big Sky and some others.
A.B. Guthrie's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I always felt like I was born about 100 years too late. But so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go out into the woods, and I had a 10-speed was my transportation at the time. So when I finished high school, I had got accepted up to university in Fairbanks and came up for one semester and quit and went and milked cows for the rest of that year, and then moved out in the woods up onto the.
Who'd you milk cows for?
It was, they had a few dairies up in that Palmer-Wasilla area just north of Anchorage that were partially subsidized by the state.
Okay.
And they never did make it so they could compete with milk being shipped up from lower 48 because they, I think just with the cold and the inability to grow a lot of the grains, they had to ship grain up to increase milk fat. And in the dairy world, it's my understanding that milk fat content, that was what determined the price they get from it. And so they were always on the edge.
Uh-huh.
But I worked at this one place, room and board, $700 a month. And you were there milking, it was about 200 cows twice a day. It was pretty wild.
They fed you, housed you, gave you $700.
Yep.
And you milked 200 cows.
Yeah.
How long did that take?
Well, it was about 4 or 5 hours of milking, if I remember right. And you'd milk them in the morning and then milk them in the evening.
And at this point, you're 18 years old, roughly.
I was 18. Yeah.
And when you say you went to live in the woods, how's that even begin? Like what?
So there was a buddy of mine that came up with me. He and I used to kick around in the mountains and winter camp and everything. And so he and I had picked out off of a map that we were going to go up onto the Tetondic River downstream from Eagle.
What year was this?
So it was 1976.
So was the Homestead Act still in play there?
No.
Okay.
So the
I might
deal
be jumping ahead, but I was just curious.
so the deal, there was a Homestead Act opening in the late 60s, I believe, and another one in 73. There have been some state land dispersals as well, but those two acts were before I ever got up there. And then the state gave away, they would have these land lotteries, in various places. But it was kind of screwy, I thought, because you were going to have a bunch of people going out into the same place, and nobody could have made a living with that many people in those places. And a lot of them didn't really survive. They would go out there, build a cabin, and then realize, I got to get in here with an airplane. There's 4 other people with places, and a lot of people left or never proved up on it.
So too many people trying to draw from the same resource.
That's right. Yeah. So out on the Yukon, people were, organized 10 to 20 miles apart, down the Yukon, up the side creeks. And so that was sufficient distance, provided they could establish trap lines in different places that they could make a living off of the country there. They weren't stepping on each other's toes.
So when you tried to pick a spot, how did you know? How did you know that you wouldn't be crowded in with other guys, or didn't you?
We didn't. And in fact, we went down to Tetondic River, and there was a guy named Dick Cook who lived there. And Tetondic River, so this is right up near the border with Canada, right, where the Yukon comes in. There's the town of Eagle. It's got a road to it. And then Circle is downstream about 160 miles. And then there's several of these tributaries that are canoeable. And so Tetondic River was the farthest upstream of those tributaries. Well, actually, 70 Mile River was from the south, but the Tetondic River flowed for about 9 miles in Alaska before it plunged into the Yukon.
Okay.
But you had big mountains there. The Ogilvie Mountains, that's a big range, goes from Dawson area all the way over to the border between the Yukon and the Porcupine River. All along that border is the western side of the Ogilvies. Big limestone mountains with sheep. And, of course, we didn't know any of that, but we knew there were mountains there. But Dick let us know that he had a place 5 miles up to Tetondic and a place down on the Yukon, and that there wasn't enough room for us. And so... And there wasn't.
Did you just run into him, or you knew he was in the area, or how'd you make contact with him?
We made contact on the river. We were lining up the Tetondic River.
Oh, to go establish a place to live.
Yeah.
You're like, damn, there's a cabin here.
Well, we didn't see the cabin. He was downstream of that, but we pulled over. He was talking. Well, he saw us on the way in, and this guy Charles was about 6.5 feet tall, and I was just about 6. And so when we came back down, even though we realized we weren't going to be able to make a place there, we went up and explored around and fished and walked in the mountains and things. On our way back down, though, Dick was talking with John McPhee. That was the year John McPhee came out there.
I'm aware that you had a run in with McPhee while he was writing coming into the country.
Right, right.
So you pull up and he's literally talking to John McPhee.
Yeah, and John McPhee. And John McPhee dips his cup into the river and offers it to us, and we're like, we don't need that. We've been drinking the river.
What the hell did you do that for?
Because he was amazed that there was a river that was clean enough that you could drink out of. That's what it was. Huh. And so he was, I don't know, offering it to us. We would kneel down and drink water and whatever, but yeah, but as it turns out, Dick was when John was with Dick was looking at our tracks, and he's telling John, okay, well, you can tell one guy's really big, because of the stride lengths and everything. So John ended up, what did he call Dick? The Grand Swami of trackers or something like that. Mm-hmm. But Dick never told him that he'd seen us before. So anyway. Yeah, what a deal! But
so you're sort of in coming into the country,
sort of, not really, but sort of, and then we headed back to Eagle because we didn't know what the heck we were going to do, and when we were back there was a fire that was taking place on the Canadian side of the border, just north of the Yukon, and the Canadians and the U.S. have these agreements, and so. The BLM put the fire. They went out and worked on that fire, and they hired me and Charles out there. And so we went and worked on a fire. And during that period of time, I met this guy, Mike Potts. And Mike Potts he lived in the village. He married a gal in the village, and he had a trap line.
Was that his real name?
Yeah, Mike Potts.
You ever hear of John Colter? He used to call it Yellowstone Colter's Hell.
Yeah.
Okay. He was over by where Seth lives in 1808, and he was with a guy, and they got caught by the Blackfeet, and that guy's name was Mike Potts.
Oh.
and they cut Mike Potts all up in little bits and smeared him all over John Colter. And then they made Colter start running, and that was Colters Run. That was Mike Potts.
Yeah.
Different Mike Potts.
That's a different Mike Potts. Yeah. Well, so Mike always, he several times he had people come out to his trap line south of Eagle, back on the North Fork of the 40 Mile, and help him do building projects or haul meat and various other things. And so he invited me to go out there with him that winter. And he had a dog team and a couple of cabins and wanted help with hunting. And I went with him. Charles got involved with gold mining. He
this is 6.5 foot Charles.
Yeah. And so he went gold mining and I went trapping, and it was kind of like an apprenticeship, building cabins with moss chinking and which is a wonderful way to go, just with materials that you find out there in the woods, and then taking care of meat. We ended up getting a bear and a big moose that was really fat. That these animals go through these cycles of fat and lean, and big bull, before they go into rut, has an enormous amount of fat on it. And so Mike showed me how to cut that stuff off and be able to render it into oil.
So rendering moose fat.
Yeah.
And he was using that moose fat as a frying medium, or like for baking, or what was he doing with it? The rendered moose fat.
Well, yes, it was for frying, but it was also just to eat with your meat. And then there was cracklings that was left over, and those were also so the deal with eating straight meat is you got to eat meat and fat, and we would use it that way. Sometimes we'd render as much as 12 gallons, I think, was the most we rendered off a single big bull.
Damn.
That's kidney fat that can fill a 5-gallon bucket once you take the kidney out, jam it in there. And then all sorts of other fat in the intestines, the ribs, the brisket, the back. Yeah.
So you were using primarily internal fat, not the external fat, not the back fat? Or
we used the back fat too.
Did you have separate uses, or was it all just one oil at the end of the day?
One oil.
Okay, got it.
And moose fat is hard, so if you take it at room temperature, it'll crack off in a chunk. It's not like butter or anything like that. It breaks off in a solid chunk that you then throw in the frying pan, melt it out, fry the meat, and then when it starts cooling off, you can dip it and get a big swath of the fat on the meat. Then
you take your thumbnail and scrape it off the roof of your mouth.
There is that, but the good thing about moose fat is if you render it clean and decant it and pour it off into a bucket, it will keep through a summer. So you can have it without spoiling. Yeah. Bear fat, on the other hand, will go rancid if it's not kept very cold. So it's very different. Bear fat is more of a liquid, or almost liquid at room temperature, but it won't keep. You can't keep it for over a summer. I mean, you could if you had it in a freezer. But
of course, freezer, yeah.
We were dealing with whatever the temperature was.
I feel
outside.
like I've had it survive just in the pantry at the house for a year plus, but
it goes rancid. Yeah, my experience was it went rancid, and then it becomes dog food because they don't care.
Sure. Can you you're talking about some pretty specific places on the map, and I think you're doing a good job for people that know that area of Alaska, but can you give just a little bit bigger of a geographical context? Because I think Eagle sort of as like the jumping off point for a lot of people that went to do what you did, and just kind of where that lies and why it's there and why people that are drawn to that are drawn to Eagle. I think that's important.
Well, yeah, so that's right at the border with Canada. I mean, it's just like 10 miles downstream of the border. Mm-hmm. And back in those days, anyway, that was after the Native Claims Settlement Act and before ANILCA. And so there was kind of a void, and all a lot of the land in Alaska at that point was just sort of managed by BLM.
Didn't we do a podcast on that native claims? and
aspects of the
Neilka?
native,
If
aspects
people are
of it.
wondering.
Yeah, can I do it real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
And correct me where I'm wrong here. During the Carter administration, they finalized a lot of it. But for a long time, a lot of the land in Alaska was in a sort of managerial limbo.
That's correct,
right? And they knew that Native Alaskan tribes would claim some, and some things would become park. But for a long time, it was just in a limbo. And then during the Carter administration, and then leading up to the Trans-Alaska Pipeline and oil in Prudhoe Bay, they started to figure out with greater clarity, this land is going to be park, this land is state land, this land is native land, this land will be BLM land. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, they discovered so the Statehood Act laid out basic acreages of land that would become part of the state ownership versus federal ownership, and that there had to be some sort of native claim settlement. But it wasn't figured out. They didn't have it all sorted out on where it was going to be or other things like that. There were some parks, like the Denali was already there, and the Arctic, they called it National Wildlife Range, and rather than a refuge. And that, so there's things that were already sorted out for the federal system. When they found oil and they were looking for a way to get it south, the Secretary of the Interior at the time is Udall, and he essentially stopped everything, put a hold on everything, and so that was the incentive to get the native land claims settled. Right.
Got it.
If you're going to put a pipeline through, we better figure out what land it is as it goes
like
south.
Who's going to end up owning what?
Right.
Yeah.
And so that took place, and it also laid out the D2 lands, which were the federal lands, conservation areas, refuges, parks, other things like that. Not necessarily where they were or how big each plot was going to be, but that there would be these parks and refuges in various places.
So in this area that we're talking about, like what Yanni asked about, where the Yukon River flows out of Yukon territory into Alaska, at that time in the 70s, a lot of people were moving into that area because you could just go live, right?
Yeah, and it was, so the deal was that BLM, what I heard was BLM had gone up into the 40-mile country and gone down and burned 2 cabins they considered to be trespass cabins. And they got taken to court over that. And the legal response was that they had to consider any cabin they thought was trespass. They had to deal with it in the courts before they did anything with it. They had to treat it like private property. And so they were just like, hands off. We're not going to deal with it.
Got it.
And so there were people that went down onto the Yukon, and there were people doing this in a lot of different places, but that was where I knew about at the time. But it was sort of you just had to kind of negotiate with neighbors, with other people that were living there, for a place that wasn't going to step on somebody else's toes or interfere with their trap line. And that's what Dick did with us. He said, you can't do it, and we're thinking Santa Fe time. And I was like, we'll be at least a mile away. He said, no, 20 miles,
So when you did that apprenticeship with the guy, did that lead you to find a place you could go set up in?
Yeah. So he did it the year before with this guy named Little John Gaudio. And Little John was out there on the 40-mile trapping at a different cabin. That same winter that I went out and helped Mike, I helped him finish a cabin in the snow, and then took care of, we had a moose, and a bear. And so I took care of those out of his main cabin while he went back and then came back out later in November or something with his dogs. And during the winter, Little John and I spent a lot of time together, and we decided we were going to go. Well, we were initially going to go up the Colleen River the next year, and when we started down the Yukon, though, Colleen is a big tributary of the Porcupine River.
Mm-hmm.
So to get there, you'd have to go down the Yukon, a couple hundred miles, and then up the Porcupine, a couple hundred miles, and then up the Colleen River. And
how were you guys? Were you guys getting in by bush plane, or were you like traveling by boat, or like how were you getting into this remote stuff?
And how were you and Little John hanging out together? Weren't you 20 miles apart?
It's double-end canoes.
Yeah.
And we were lining. We had no motors.
Yeah.
And so...
and then the winter dogs, of course.
Yeah, so Little John had dogs. I didn't at the time, but I ended up getting a couple of puppies and off a litter. And so when we started down the Yukon, though, we had two canoes. He had a canoe and I had one. And we got down, partway down, and found out that nobody was living on the Kandik River. Kandik River is a big tributary of the Yukon there between Eagle and Circle. So it's about 80 miles. The mouth is about 80 miles downstream of Eagle. And it also headwatered in Canada and flowed for over 100 miles through Alaska. And we decided there was a guy living at the mouth of the Kandik River. And it was a guy named Fred Beach. And
he told you no one's upstream of me.
Well, several other people did too. They knew that there was nobody up there, and he reiterated that and said he rarely makes it past 3 miles up. He had two dogs, and so we decided we're going to go up there and check it out. And so we started lining up the river and feeding ourselves along the way. We had a gill net, and we would shoot beavers and feed us and the dogs in that way. We'd shoot squirrels sometimes for the dogs. And
what was your lining up process, and what type of mileage could you make going upstream like that?
So lining is a process where you have about 100-foot long rope, and one end's tied to the front of the canoe, one's to the back. Lining is more easily done if they got a little keel on the bottom. And so what you're doing is adjusting these two lines so that canoe stays offshore and tries to stay parallel with the current. So a big gravel bar, you just walk up on the gravel and it's out in the water, pulling it along. And then when you want to cross, you jump in it and cross and go up the other side. If you have to get by a drift pile or by a big cut bank, you might use a pole, about a 10-foot spruce pole, and just push yourself off the bottom to get past.
So are you kind of walking backwards when you're lining then?
No, it's not that much. Well, if you were hauling a moose, you might.
Yeah, not enough drag.
Not enough drag. It just goes real smooth.
So by adjusting the two lengths of that rope, you're just adjusting the angle of the canoe, and it's basically faring in the current.
Yeah, you can have it that it's straight out from you. Right.
You can,
not
just
even
about.
downriver. Yeah.
Just about, yeah. And so there's boulder fields on the Kandik River, and so if you got a keel, it's like power steering. You can go around between rocks and everything. So, whereas if you don't have a keel, it kind of bumps against shore. It doesn't go very well at all.
And how many miles were you making on that big river?
Sometimes 10 miles, more often 6 or 8 a day.
Yeah, and you got
so I don't know if you know this, but when the Second World War came along, the government ended up, when we got involved in it, they shut down materials that could be used for the war effort from going anywhere else, and all of the mines in Alaska, with a couple of exceptions, got shut down. And what people back in the 30s and early 40s were doing is trapping in the winter and then working the mines in the summer. And so the fur industry went down too, and they left. And so that was all the cabins that we found on the Kandik were of that vintage, So we were come in there 40 years after anybody had been there. And
Wow.
and so we went upriver with one canoe, and one of us would walk the spruce groves looking for cabins, and the other would line and would switch off here and there. And we found a few cabins, but none of which were functional. They had because back then they didn't have a lot of the waterproofing tarps and various other things, and so they would develop a leak somewhere. They used tar paper on the roofs and sometimes dirt over that or moss. And but if they ever got a leak, then you'd get a rot going on, and the roof would fall in, or a wall would crash out, or something like that. But what we did see was big piles of moose antlers, and then in the upper river, big piles of caribou antlers too. So we thought,
Piles.
well, what do you do with them?
I mean, from the people that were living there.
From the people that had lived there.
I see.
And they wouldn't do anything with. They bring them in, but they wouldn't do anything with them, so they throw them in a pile,
I see.
and they would last for a long time. And so, porcupines chew them, and squirrels and things like that, but they were still there.
That was a good sign, because you're
And
thinking
we thought, why go to the Colleen? We're going to come up here.
Sure.
And that's what we did.
And then when you were seeing all those antlers, it would show you where people had lived and also show you where places that might be good hunting.
Exactly. And in almost every case, there was a thin area, open lead or something in the Kandik River that would, for water in the winter. They were great places. Dry spruce woods, and good water.
And you found a guy that had starved to death, right?
I did, yeah. Me and Fred, we found him. He was
nowhere near a big pile of antlers.
He was not. Well, so Little John and I had gone up, and we had built 2 cabins, or mostly built 2 cabins. And then we went back to Eagle and got traps and things and stoves, and we came back down. And Fred came with us, and a couple other folks who were interested in having line cabins, just cabins, emergency cabins. If you get wet, because these rivers, they'll overflow, and sometimes you need to get past anyway, and so you get wet. And having a cabin in various places was beneficial. So Fred wanted one about 10 miles up the river, and he's the one that kind of designed this. It wasn't a very good cabin. It was about 5 feet tall on the inside, and there weren't any windows. And the door was just a piece of plywood that we had found in a drift pile out on the Yukon, and it just had these leather hinges on it. So that was and then a bunk. It was about 6 feet wide by 9 feet long.
Just somewhere to survive.
Somewhere to get out of the cold and have a fire. And that's where Smeagle ended up going. We called him Smeagle. Well, so the deal with him, he came down.
Hold on, who's this guy?
This is the dead guy.
The dead guy, eventually.
Oh, sorry.
So
Eventually, he's
So
not there yet.
You knew this guy before he died.
I did not, but Fred had seen him. Fred was this gregarious guy that lived at the mouth of the Kandik, and a lot of different people would come in there. There was a slough that you could catch pike and things, and so everybody had it on their maps. They would go in there, and he would go over and trade things. A beaver hide for a sleeping bag or various things like this, and one year, this guy that we called Smeagle, he called himself John the Baptist, but he and a buddy of his had floated down from Canada on a log raft, and there was a big cabin just like a mile upstream of the Kandik, and they had seen that and gone to spend the night there, and his buddy during the night shoved the raft off and left, and so he wakes up the next morning.
He ditched him.
He ditched him.
Ditched Smeagle.
And so he had the clothes on his back, a sleeping bag, and a shotgun, a 20 gauge. Those Rossies with the external.
Yeah.
He had a 20 gauge shotgun.
You just got to wonder, how much background have you tried to do any background? Like the ditching the partner, is that bad character of which one?
Yeah, who was the sort of dick,
Right, exactly.
I have no idea. But this guy wandered down, and he didn't know Fred was
John
down.
the Baptist Smeagle.
John the Baptist, yeah. Wandered down to, and this is like early September. He wandered down to the mouth of the Kandik and saw that there was somebody in this cabin across the slough. And Fred came over and got him. And Fred was always like, happy with the system, and always wanted to show it to somebody. A canoe back on a lake where they go to hunt ducks and muskrats, and various other, a cache here or there,
just so I'm clear, like he had a sweet setup and he'd want to share
He'd share it, yeah.
Like I catch pike here, I do this there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And he was not very ambitious, so he might get a lynx or two, in trapping, or an 8 or 10 marten, and that would be enough for him. He just wasn't very ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
And so
anyway, not very ambitious guy out there though. It's got to be fairly ambitious.
Maybe he didn't build the cabin. They called it Morris's. It was from back a long time ago. Yeah, but anyway, he decided that he was going to go back east that fall, and he told this guy that he had to catch a ride or build a raft and go to Circle. That he couldn't stay there, but the guy stayed, and Fred got a ride. There was a barge called the Brainstorm that ran out of Circle, and it would go up to Eagle and Dawson.
I got to interrupt you just because I got lost for a minute.
So
Fred's living there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just stick with just calling him Smeagle. Fred's living there. Smeagol comes down. Smeagol's been abandoned by his buddy.
Yeah.
Now, who says they're going back? They got to go east.
Fred had his plan to go back east, so he had a bunch of food stored.
Oh, and he says you can't stay here at my house.
You can't stay at my house. You have to find a ride to Circle
and
or
get out
take
of
a
here.
raft.
I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be out of town, and when I'm out of town, I don't want you here eating my food.
That's right.
Got it. Understood.
And
sorry about that.
And Fred got to town by hailing this barge. The barge would pick people up. I mean, it was a big enough barge it could haul like a dump truck, on its deck and building materials and things. And it would go down and go to Fort Yukon and then up to Old Crow on the Porcupine in Canada. But that was that barge's route, right? And the road that would, where supplies were loaded was Circle. And so anyway, Fred got a ride up and went back east, hitchhiked back east, and spent till it was early November when he got back to Eagle and it wasn't frozen yet. There were ice flowing, but he went downstream in his canoe, in amongst all these ice chunks.
In November?
Yeah, in November.
Not ambitious.
Well, he knew how to do stuff.
When I hear not ambitious, let me tell you what I'm picturing.
So he gets down almost to the Kandik River when the river is just jamming up a little too much for even him. And he pulls his canoe out, walks to his cabin, and it's about 20 below. And Smeagol has moved his lamp and his sleeping gear to this cabin up at 3 Mile Creek, 3 miles farther up. And Fred was pissed. And then he left a note on the door. I'm up at 3 Mile Cabin, John the Baptist, And so Fred goes up there, and this guy has been eating his jarred fish. He's been eating the moose that he had and has sewn clothes out of furs that Fred had. He's loaded all of our ammunition. Fred had this metal box bolted to a tree that would kind of like an underbed box on a truck. And it was back in the woods behind his place. But of course, he'd shown this guy that. And that was where all of us, me and Fred and Little John, had reloading materials there. And so he had loaded everything. We all shot 243s. And so he had loaded it all. But with different, you shake it and none of it was
consistent.
None of it was consistent. We're like, this is not good. And we had to get a bullet puller then eventually.
To undo it all.
Undo him. Yeah. We weren't going to shoot him. We had no idea what he'd done.
Right. You're like, this one's good for grouse. This one's might take down a moose.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had left my snowshoe. I had store-bought snowshoes, but I left them down there because I wanted to build a pair. And I knew that if I had a store-bought pair, I wouldn't.
Yep.
Right? And so I had left a pair down there. And built a new set. But anyway, Fred is pissed off at this guy. Fred used to grow pot on the roof of that cabin. He would throw dog shit up there, and then he would throw seeds. It wasn't any good.
Psychedelic weed. That's like mushroom.
Yeah, it wasn't any good.
Weed?
What?
It wasn't good weed?
No.
Not for the area, good weed, or not good weed in
Beggars
general?
can't be choosers kind of weed.
It was.
It would give you a headache more than it would give you a high. But anyway, this guy had smoked all his pot too.
Man, he was living high on the hog while you guys were gone.
And Fred got pissed about that, and he says it wasn't any
gall
good.
of sticking
So,
around.
anyway, Fred says, you got to go. Circle or eagle. After it freezes up, you got to go because I'm going to kill you otherwise, right? And so this guy says, I'm not going either. I'm going to Chalkitsik. So Chalkitsik is on the Black River flowing down into the Porcupine. And it's a long ways north from the Kandik River. But that's what this guy says. And so
Further into the bush.
further.
Yeah.
And so Fred outfits him with some grain and some rice and some beans
Some
and
stems.
gave him a 22 pistol.
Holy cats.
And this guy takes off with my snowshoes, right? and cruises up the Kandik River because he's going to go up the Kandik and over into the Black River drainage. And so I came down late. He left late November, and I had
Freaking dark too.
I was staying in this cabin above Johnson Gorge, so about 30 miles up the river. And so I would line a canoe up there and spend the winter. But there was a pass you could go over some mountains and down to the Yukon. And I preferred to do that than run the river because the river would overflow and then your trail would be gone and things. So you could, get to a place that it was all water. So I came down.
Overflow meaning that you get water flowing on top of the ice.
That's right. Yeah. So once the river freezes over, you get snow on it. Sometimes the flow is enough that it doesn't have enough room underneath the ice as it starts thickening up weight on it and things. And it'll seep up into the snow over the ice. And then it's slush for a while until it reaches the surface and refreezes, But anyway, so I had come down over this pass and come down to get my snowshoes because the ones I built, I broke and I had to splice them. Anyway, I got down there in early December, like 10 days after Smeagle had left Fred. And Fred says, well, he took your snowshoes. And I said, let's go and get him. And so we started walking up the river, but that was a really big snow year. And it was, we went about 5 miles up and I decided, yeah, heck, he can go wherever he wants. But, I'm like, he's not going to make it to Chalkitsik. No way. And it actually became a topic among all of us living on the river. And
where is Smeagle?
Well, we all knew from being out there that you can't make a living with a 22 pistol in the winter. You might shoot a grouse or a squirrel or something like that here or there, but you can't feed yourself that way. And he didn't have enough food to start with.
Something tells me his buddy had a reason to abandon him after hearing this story.
I think maybe so.
Yeah, we've honed in on who's the dick.
Yeah.
I think maybe so.
So just to pause here for a second.
Yeah.
Again, it became a topic amongst everybody on the river. I imagine this is mostly in your heads with little bits of being together. Because keep in mind right now we're in the days of instant gratification. Point being right there. Cell phones, text messages, right?
Hey, sorry about that.
No, that's over here.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Well, I should put mine on airplane too. But.
So, Phil will tell you not to have that thing on the table either.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, we get interference sometimes.
Throw it on your coat over there.
I'm going to turn it off.
Yep.
Yeah, you're doing great. Large preamble just to ask, how often are you all getting together to have conversations in person?
Hey, we had good dog teams.
Okay.
We cruised around and we did talk and we did have big gatherings of Christmas, New Year's and various other things. No, we talked a lot.
Okay.
There'd be people traveling, just say hi or to share some meat or whatever. But there was discussion. Everybody uniformly said there's no way he can make it to Chalakitsik. But there were those that said he probably waved somebody down, an airplane. But we didn't have hardly any airplanes ever go by us there. And some people thought, well, maybe he went up a little bit and then walked around Fred's place and got onto the river and walked a circle or whatever, and it's like, no, we pay attention to tracks. Us living out in the woods in the snow country, you're always looking at tracks. There's nothing that gets by you with tracks. And so we were like, nah, he's got to be dead, And so the next spring, the Kandik River is great in the fall, has lots of moose and other, bears and things like that. But in the springtime, the Yukon's the place to be because there's the flyway. You get all the waterfowl coming into Alaska is going by there. And then there's these big south-facing bluffs on the mountains that butt up against the Yukon, and they call them steppe community, because they're just at that angle. They'll drain all their snow really early in March sometimes, and you get all this new growth coming out, even though everywhere else, there's still 3 feet of snow laying around, and the bears would come out early there. So it was. The Yukon was the place to be in the spring, feeding yourself. And so that left me with my canoe up at my upper place at 30 miles up. And so I would have to walk the ridge and down and then canoe down to get my canoe back in the spring. So that's what me and Fred did. We went up and walked in and get my canoe, and we're coming down. And when we come to where this cabin is back in the woods, we come around this corner, I see my snowshoes hanging in a tree right there. We're a couple hundred yards up the river, we came around and I say, Fred, Smeagol's here.
Mystery
and he's
solved.
not alive. And we get up there.
And you knew he wasn't alive.
Well, he couldn't have been alive. We didn't have any food there.
And the snowshoes were still there.
And the snowshoes were there. He didn't walk away. And so we get up there. We got 5 dogs. Okay, I had 3 and Fred had 2 at that time.
All in the canoe with you?
No, they're running the base.
Oh, I see. Okay. They're just keeping up.
Yeah. And so we get there and walk up to the cabin, and the dogs are all running around, and they are just really, they focus on dead things, right? They really like, if you shoot a bear out of a tree or get a moose, they want to be there. It's just like that's the thing of interest. So I open the door, and of course I knock on it just in case, but... And there's this sleeping bag on the bunk. The bunk had been 9 feet long and 3 feet wide, and it was just these little black spruce back and forth, big ends back and forth, and then on 2 poles that were notched into the walls, and so all of those poles except about 3 feet of them had been burned. He had a saw in the house. And so I picked him up, and he was light, and I brought him outside. He's
in his bag.
Yeah, he's in his bag. And so we took him out.
In Fred's bag.
Fred's bag. and it was he was so skinny. His eyes were sunken into his face. And we took his clothes off because we just wanted to see what had happened there. And he was seriously skin on bone. There was no meat. He had starved out, and the .22 was hanging on a nail in the back wall, and so he definitely didn't kill himself.
Yep.
And the dogs, they were like 20 feet away, looking the other way.
Whoa!
They wanted nothing to do with this.
Wow!
You could see their ears are turned back to us, so they were paying attention, but they didn't want to be anywhere as near. It was almost like what we were thinking was one of the gods has fallen, And because I don't know what they think of us, but I think that may be.
Oh, that's what the dogs think. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
They didn't want nothing to do with it. They didn't want to be near it. They didn't want to smell it close, nothing. And so we debated.
How long at that point, how long you think he'd been dead?
I really don't know.
Was he froze?
He had been froze, but he was thawed then.
Thawed out again. And
hair was starting to slip on his forehead. But he didn't smell rotten, and so we were thinking, what do we do with this guy? We don't have a shovel. The ground's still frozen. We can't bury him. Do we try to take him somewhere? Do we take him to Circle? That would be at least a 3 or 4 day process to get down there. The Yukon was packed with ice on both sides at that point in time. Breakup had put a bunch of ice on the banks. Neither of us had a penny, and we were making our living day by day going down the river. And if we went down to Circle, we didn't know anywhere where there would be where to go for food, whether we could get him down there without him. We thought we could put ice in, have him in the bottom of the boat with ice, but that would put us out because we would get down there and we'd have nothing, no way to make a living. And so we just decided we're going to leave him here. And we put him back on some tundra a little ways away. And we took off. And then I went back there later in the summer and he was gone. So something had
Did you guys eventually get word out to like some authority?
We told people, but there wasn't anything anybody could do.
Yeah.
We didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
As far as you know, has he ever been identified?
I have no idea.
Probably a lot of people. That happened to a lot of people up there.
Yeah.
I don't think he was out there because he wanted to stay in touch with his family, right? So
yeah.
We should probably skip forward to what a fella does when he gets lonely and he figures he's going to need a companion out living this life.
Yeah, we could go on this forever.
Can we? Yeah, because otherwise we are going to be here all day, which is fine with me. I'll just cancel a couple upcoming calls.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. I mean, if you guys thought about it that much, I think it's longer than I would have thought about it. It would have been like, well, hopefully that 22 isn't rusted.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Did you
Did you
reuse the sleeping bag?
Fred took the sleeping bag.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you got your snowshoes.
I got my snowshoes. Yeah.
I was just thinking too, like if he was that emaciated, had you guys found him alive, probably wouldn't be anything you could have done for him.
Ooh, I think that would be hard. Yeah.
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 Where did you wind up? You eventually found your territory. So did your whole time in the bush wind up being in this river system that you're talking about now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You eventually got to where, like Yanni was saying, you eventually got to where you wanted a companion.
That's absolutely true.
And the dogs weren't cutting it.
Dogs weren't cutting it. Well, they were great, but it wasn't the same. Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't running into single women out there.
How many years have you been doing it before you decided to head into Fairbanks?
I think 3.
Okay. So you're still young.
Yeah.
Were there some couples out there, or was it mostly single men doing this thing?
No, there were couples out there.
There were.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the other people out there were couples.
Oh,
and,
I see.
Yeah.
So you were a third wheel.
Well, not really. I wasn't there. I was a one wheel.
When you say most of the people out there, like how many people are we talking about?
There were about 20 people or so that lived between Eagle and Circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many miles is that?
It varied. 160 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how often would you see, like how long would you go without seeing people?
Well, so when I was up the Kandik, it would be months.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. My father, he came out to visit the first year that I was out there, that I spent on the Kandik River. So I'd been out on the North Fork at 40 Mile. And it was funny because he was working for Park Service. He was a historian down in Southwest region out of Santa Fe for a while. And then he got offered a job in Alaska to deal with the D2 lands, which became the park lands. He was Park Service, so that's what he dealt with. And he was up in Eagle dealing with stuff relating to the Yukon, what became the Yukon Charlie Preserve.
Yep.
And he got buried in effigy there by somebody because the Eagle did not like it that his federal lands were coming around.
Yep.
But they were kind of laid out in statehood, and they were laid out in the native
That's
claims
crazy
settlement.
that your dad ended up like right near you.
So I had no idea he was there. But when Little John and I had gone up and gotten the traps and everything, we were at our canoes, ready to shove off, and my dad pulls up. Right, and he says, Randy, where are you at now? And I said, well, up at Indian Grave Creek. That's one of the tributaries of the Kandik, and that was 60 miles up the Kandik, and that was the cabin I was going to be staying in. And he says, I'm going to come and visit you for Christmas, and when I say fine, and we took off, and he took off, and come that time of year. So I didn't have a calendar or a watch or anything, out there. So I don't really know when that was going to be. But Little John had been at the lower cabin near the pass to the Yukon, and he had made a trip over there and found out they were doing a big Christmas shindig at this one place on a lake beside the Yukon. So he came up to get me, and I said I can't go. What if my dad comes? He says he's not going to come. That's how's he going to get up here? And I said it would be horrible if he came and I wasn't here. So I stayed. I was getting caribou, and I was the only one getting caribou out there at the time. And so Little John leaves and goes over to this party, and I'm hauling caribou in from a place that I'd gotten a few. And at the time, the limit was no more than 10 a day.
No more than.
No more than 10 a day. And so anyway, I'm hauling this caribou back, and with the dogs, and I hear this airplane come in and circle around and land, and it was Ron Warblow who ran. They had an air service out of Tok, and he was in a 185 on skis, and Ron was not going to leave him be at my place unless it was warm and fresh tracks, and which there was. So I come back, I hear that plane leave, and I come back, and my dad is there, and he has a number 10 can of cookies and a thing of cough drops, and he didn't bring any other food. He thought I had a bunch of food. I've got just moose fat, moose meat, and caribou meat, and that's it. And I had no coffee, no tea, no nothing, right? And he's going to try to quit smoking, so he's got.
Did you have salt?
I had salt, and so he has Copenhagen, because he'd been a smoker pretty much all his life that I had known him, and so he has Copenhagen there to try to ease things up. Well, he had a few different things he was dealing with. One, and they eating just meat, and all I would do is fry it in a pan and then eat right out of the pan, and then go dip buckets of water. So I had water and meat and fat. That's what I was eating. And then for light, I had a moose fat candle, an old, like a tuna fish can with a bent piece in it and a bit of old Levi as the wick. And you'd have to set it on the stove. You'd have to set it on the stove to melt it, and then you could light it, and it would keep going mostly, and give off just a candle light. Mm-hmm. So that was my light. And so he ended up asking me to carve him a pipe at one point, and because he's going to start smoking his Copenhagen, because it wasn't doing enough for him. But
when people do that move, when they do they're going to quit something,
yeah,
and they're going to be like, well, I'm going to take advantage of this remote or out of the country thing.
It doesn't work.
They never they never factor in the people that are around them.
Yeah,
I know.
And then they go and like, well, I decided I'm going to quit drinking.
Yeah,
I'm going to quit smoking while you and me are away for a long time.
I just talked to an outfitter who they had to fly a guy out.
Really?
Yeah, DTs.
Because he's like, this is the perfect opportunity for me to stop drinking.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So
I bet those cookies your dad brought were good.
Oh,
we finished them immediately. We just dug into them and ate them up. I was adapted to the meat at that point in time, to just meat, but I still enjoyed some other things, and so Yeah, I gobbled them down.
Did you ever lose your salt tolerance? Like, did you ever get to the point where you didn't even want salt on the meat?
No.
You always
never.
wanted it salted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it salted.
Have you ever read Stephenson's My Life with the Eskimo?
Absolutely.
Yeah. When they would go into these with these groups,
yeah.
with these Eskimo hunting, they would find that to keep your supplies from getting diminished, they would salt everything because they hated salt.
Oh, that was a protective measure against getting...
Yeah, so you'd have your stash of food, right?
Yeah.
They would just salt it.
Yeah.
And then no one would touch it because they salted it. Because they didn't do dietary salt.
The Eskimo didn't.
No.
No.
And he says if you salted meat, they don't want nothing to do with it.
Don't you think they were getting salt from seal fat and
Yeah,
stuff
but they weren't
like that?
using it. They weren't using it as a seasoning.
Yeah.
I mean, if you eat a fish out of the ocean, he's not salty.
No, but right, just your body chemistry. Don't you need like a certain amount of iodine?
Yeah.
Right. So
he mentions it like multiple times that just they don't want salt, and then he eventually arrives. Stephenson arrives at a point where because he has to go without for months and months. They run out of salt. He goes months without salt eventually, and then gets where it ruins it for him. He doesn't want any kind of salt on his food, and he talks about it being like it's a learned that eating all that salt is learned. It's a learned taste, and if you go without it for a couple of years or whatever, you can't eat salty meat anymore. No, that's what he says. He was wrong about a few things.
So he did mention that they considered polar bear liver to be toxic, that you couldn't eat it without
toxic
dying.
Amounts of vitamin A.
Yeah,
that's a widely held belief. Is that not true?
Yeah, I think it is true.
Okay.
So, but it's also true for grizzlies. So, me and Little John at one point, after eating dried moose meat for a week, we ended up getting a grizzly and cutting him up, and we're frying heart, liver, and kidney in a full pan load. And we both got headaches that just pounded us for a couple of days. We couldn't get up. And I think it was vitamin A poisoning.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so I think that it's not just polar bear, but it's the predator livers.
And did you get that grizz with the 243 or in
Absolutely.
a trap? Yeah, 243, yeah.
That was your gun, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us how you talk about, I'm not trying to move you along, I'm just curious. How old were you when you decided that I'm going to make a go of it and I need a wife and kids?
Well, so I must have been 20 or 21 when I decided I was going to make a concerted effort to find a woman. So I built a raft and I floated down to Circle and I hitchhiked into Fairbanks. And I had been at the university for one semester, so I knew there was these personal things. So I left a personal note on there. I don't know exactly what it says right now, but it was something about a trapper.
Hold on, you made a raft, go to Circle, hitchhike to Fairbanks, and then make a little flyer for yourself?
Yeah.
With the little tear-off tabs?
Little advertisement.
No, there were no tear-off tabs. Yeah. No, that was my first attempt.
Oh, you know what's the cutest thing in the world is Paul's daughter, Paul and Jen's daughter, Brooke, at the MeatEater store downtown. She's got a tear-off tab for,
nice.
for
For
skull
skull
cleaning. Yeah, and I was bummed the other day. I saw only one thing was tore off, so I don't know if it was there that long. I was going to tear a couple
Maybe
more
it
off
was
just to
her
make
second one.
Just to make it look a little hotter.
Well, maybe that's representative of folks not killing stuff walking into the MeatEater store.
Well, it could be that, or it could be that social media is her preferred mode too.
Yeah.
Anyways, go ahead. So you make an ad. What did it say?
So not only that, but I had a dog with me and a rifle. So I had the double strap rifle, right? And just because then it's like a little backpack.
Oh, I got you.
And that's how I carry my rifle to this day. And then the dog had a dog pack. And so what we did is we would walk down the road, and I would shoot. It was big rabbit year then, and I would shoot rabbits on the road, and for our food as I was hitchhiking. Finally got a ride all the way to Fairbanks, and then ended up getting a ride on the other route going to Eagle, and then built another raft and came downriver from Eagle. In fact, I ended up stopping at Dick Cook's place, and in the spring that year, and he wanted to go hunting sheep. And so we took off into the mountains there, and he gave me a 257 Roberts that he had, and with different he had different bullets loaded up for different purposes, right? There was for a moose load or to a goose load or to all these different things. So he's got like 5 shells, and we go up after sheep, and I get a shot at this big ram, and it was a poof, and there's this bit of sleeping bag fiber that comes out of it. So it's a download, right? But it hits him in both elbows. Boom. And he's down. And
hold on. What's a download?
Like a birdshot load type of deal? So he was using the ticking for wadding. Is that right?
That's right. So you're not putting near as much powder in. And so it's a slower, it's a bullet that's not going to, we did that for squirrels and grouse too. We used Full Metal Jacket in 243.
And you just stuff you fill the excess space with down.
Yeah, because if it's laying there and the powder is just spread across the bottom, it can, they say it can back pressure.
Okay.
But Dick had not kept track. This is Smeagle, with all his things. That's what we would have run into if we just started using those. But Dick had assured me that these were all big loads, which they weren't. So this ram gets up on his back legs. I don't know how he got up, and ran on 2 legs over the edge, and Dick ended up dispatching him down the hill a little bit. But that was a crazy situation there. But then I got in my raft again after we had come down off of the mountains. Dick,
how long was this sheep hunt?
1 day.
I got to tell you, this is the most interested I've been in a getting a lady story in a long time.
Yeah. And meanwhile, you set your trap. You like baited the trap with this note.
Yeah, I never got any. It was my mailing address was P.O. General Delivery Eagle, right? And I never got anything. So that was a failed
What
attempt.
did the note say, though?
Trapper living up on the Yukon is seeking a woman, I think, something like that.
Nothing about any kind of criteria.
Young and handsome trapper.
Yeah, he said, 21 years old.
You didn't put anything
fella.
about you didn't put down any parameters that you were hoping to achieve here.
I did not. No.
Did you put your age down?
I don't think I did. I think, it was a failed attempt. Okay, it was my first attempt, but it was a failed attempt.
Let's hear about the successful one.
So I went in again the next summer. And so, but there's a problem, to get to develop a relationship. I was going to have to move into Fairbanks and get a job and everything, I just couldn't do that. You were going to miss, the king salmon season. You were going to miss the moose season. You're going to, it doesn't work. So I went in and happened to be there during the solstice fair. They have a big party on solstice every year. And Karen, my wife of 43 years right now, was sitting taking care of somebody else's dog, and in front of a live music band. And so I sauntered over there, and we struck up a conversation. Well, she was taking classes up at the university to go out and teach, and I asked her if she wanted to come and join me, and she said, "When are you going?" I said, "Tomorrow."
Was she kind of a hippie?
Yeah, Birkenstocks.
Yeah.
Everybody called us hippies on the river.
The whole thing, watching a dog at a music thing.
Yeah.
But back then, hippies were kind of hard. Like, they'd go live in the woods. Different than...
And
there's still plenty of them in Alaska.
Yeah.
I call it
sure.
it's the hippie redneck of Alaska. They're rough and tough, but kind of hippies at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose. I didn't. If they were hippies, I don't see anything wrong with them.
Me neither.
Yeah, they were great people that lived out there and high functioning, doing a lot of different stuff.
Sure, man.
I mean, taking care of dogs and putting up food for the winter and dealing with salmon and building cabins and traveling all over. Yeah, it was a high functioning group.
When you met her, How abruptly did you lay out what the proposal was?
Oh, within a couple hours. And
he said he's got one day to make a decision, right?
Well,
are you leaving the next day?
And she says, I'm not going to go, but give me where do I write you? So she would write me, and then the postmaster in Eagle would give these letters to people to go downriver. And so I would get a letter from somebody when I was down on the Yukon, and of course I had to borrow stationery, write back. But we exchanged, I don't know, 3 or 4 letters during the course of that summer and fall. And then I was up the Kandik River and didn't get any more mail until I went down to the Yukon one time. And she had put in her note that she was traveling down to San Francisco, where she had gone to college. And so I came down and met her at the airport in Anchorage. So get this, I've got a beaver coat and moose hide pants, mucklucks with beaver tops to them, beaver mittens and hat. And I get on an Alaska Airlines jet out of Fairbanks, and they take me just like that down to Anchorage, right? And my dad meets me down there, and he's like, Jesus Christ, Randy, you can't dress like this in the city. So he takes me out and gets me new clothes and boots and stuff like that. And so I met her, though, at her airplane, and I had a ticket to go with her. So I went down to San Francisco with her and spent a couple weeks. And then she was teaching in Akiak, which is down in Lower Kuskokwim, a village down there. And
I don't want to diverge from your love story, but when you got to San Francisco, was it like, holy shit, culture shock kind of thing?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd grown up in Santa Fe,
Yeah.
So I mean, it isn't like San Francisco, but
yeah,
no, it was culture shock.
Yeah.
She took me to New York one time because she grew up back on the East Coast, and I'm like, oh, that's Martin. Oh, that's muskrat. There's foxfur.
Yeah.
All these different fur coats that people were wearing, and I also said, don't let go of me because I don't think I could make it out of here. And so, anyway, we've had a lot of great adventures, but I did go down there with her, and we got married the next year out on the river.
That's awesome.
So,
and you've been together how long?
43 years.
And when you got married, did she move up on the river with you?
She did, and I took her to one of our cabins that was about a 9x10 cabin, and showed it to her, thinking, here it is. This is the place. And she's going, I don't really think this is a good place for me. But we'd already been married, okay? And so I says, or we can go upriver a mile or so, and there's this old cabin that was there, and we could build a new one. And that's what we did, and we built the biggest cabin that was out there on the river at that point in time.
How big was it?
It was 18 feet square inside.
Oh, okay.
And 2-story.
Oh,
well,
wow.
It wasn't full 2-story. It was a 2/3 loft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mansion.
It was a big one.
Were you peeling those logs or just leaving them and letting the bark fall off eventually?
I left them. They were dry trees, though.
Like fire-killed trees? Or
No, they weren't fire-killed. It was a big grove of spruce tree that was growing along the Kandik River, and there was a green swath that was maybe 50 yards in width, and then there was a dead one. And I think the permafrost just came in underneath them and killed them.
Oh, I see.
But they were big trees, big dry trees, all of them. So firewood was not a problem ever.
At that point, were you building with a chainsaw or all hand tools?
A bow saw and an axe, and a
Wow.
2-inch auger for peg work. No, I didn't have a chainsaw for a long time.
Were you moving them on the snow, or how are you transporting big logs like that? An 18-foot, what's the diameter?
They were 20 feet long, and the big ones were probably 12 inches at the butt, and 9 or 10 at the small end. They're real uniform. I just would grab them and haul them in.
Yeah, there you go.
You know how like normally if you're married, it'd be, like you might get in a big old fight about, I don't know, like, oh, we should stay home this Christmas. Or no, we should go to so-and-so's this Christmas. And that might be like a thing.
Yeah.
As you were married, living out in the bush like that, was there like a major version of that? A major version where it was like, we should live like this, living off the land out in the bush, or we should go live in the town? I mean, is that like a constant source of tension?
No, it really wasn't. I think the biggest tension initially was when we were leaving Eagle with our supplies in our double-end canoe, getting ready to go up the Cannock for the winter. Karen came up with this industrial-sized box of toilet paper.
Okay.
Right? And I'm like, we can't fit that, Karen. We can't fit it. She goes, it goes or I stay.
Huh.
And so
laid it right out.
She laid it right out. I says, there's moss, Karen. And she goes, not going to use it. This toilet paper goes or I'm not going. And so the toilet paper came. That was, I mean, it didn't last for very long because
you started using it all.
No, I didn't use it. I didn't use it. She did, but she made her position known.
Yeah.
So we went out into the woods and built that place and stayed there a couple of years, and then she wanted to go and teach again. So we went together out to, in that case, it was Chivac out on the Yukon Delta, and that one didn't pan out very well because they had financial problems. That was a BIA school, and they hadn't accounted for all of the funds from the year before, so BIA was withholding funds. So none of the teachers got paid for like 4 or 5 months, and she had student loans, various other things, and couldn't go that far. So she quit and got a job in Dalton. So I'm dealing with moving dogs, sleds, all this other stuff. And Non-Dalton was a wonderful place. That's over near Lake Clark, southwest of Anchorage. Beautiful place. And we were there for a couple of years. And then back.
And did you set up and trap there too then?
No, I hunted, but I didn't trap. I hunted and I fished. I put gill nets under the ice down there and would catch 20 or 30 of these great big humpback whitefish and some lake trout virtually every night, and in Non-Dalton once the lake froze up, and so the folks in the town there would come down with these sleds because they knew I was using it for dog food, so they would trade dried sockeyes for fresh whitefish, and we did that all winter for 2 years. It was wonderful.
And you were making no cash money at that point?
None.
You personally?
Yeah, none. I did build my first birch bark canoe there, though, in Non-Dalton.
Just for fun?
In the teacher's housing. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah. To learn to do it.
I wanted to learn to do it. Yeah. And so these three old guys there would, when they heard I was starting to build this, they knocked on my door and I opened it. They walk in, took seats, and they would sit there pretty much every day and just watch. Every once in a while, they'd say something about how they used to do it, but nobody had been making birch bark canoes up there in the old way since about sometime in the 1920s. They stopped building them. They had got canvas then, and they started doing canvas boats that were a bit easier to build. But anyway, it was great, and they gave me suggestions like to mix caribou hair cut up small into the pitch for doing the sealant on the birch bark canoes, and
makes it more like a fiberglass or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like straw in adobies and things like that. Yeah, holds it together.
Did you continue to use that skill in your lifetime?
I built I think 11 or 12 birch bark canoes.
You're shitting me, really?
Yeah. Athabascan style ones. I built 2 Eastern style. But the Athabascan style is a little different construction, and so I just thought, we're in Alaska, we'll do them this way. Yeah.
Damn. Well, at this point, you've gone to school one semester.
Yeah, that's true.
So why did you like? How how educated are you now? I mean, you got a lot of school now.
A lot of school. Did
you go to graduate school?
Yeah, I did, and that was really one of the more traumatic things was moving into town. Traumatic things for me. So we went back. Let me
please.
So we went back in the woods. We went out a couple of times. When Karen taught in Eagle and for a little bit, and I would go out on trapline then. But at one point, remember the Native Claims Settlement Act happened and NILCA happened, and all of a sudden, people were there was a desire to start claiming land or getting land that would go to one entity or another. And in the interior, Doyon was the big regional corporation, and they had selected the land that our cabin was on. It had been BLM land prior to that, and it was just outside of the Yukon Charlie Park boundary. And Doyon said that they hadn't figured initially, because we communicated, they had not decided how to deal with trespass cabins. How to permit them or not and everything. Well, finally in 1990, they sent us a note telling us that we had to leave, that we couldn't be out there anymore.
The tribal corporation did.
Yeah, the Doyon Native Corporation. And so, but we were getting ready to go anyway because we had one dog team and it couldn't take all of us on a big trip into Eagle or to visit other people. So we had like 5 or 6 dogs at that time, great big 100-pound, 120-pound huskies. They were wonderful animals. And, in order to have, the kids with their own teams or Karen with her own team, so you can travel as a family, it would have been really costly. You can't fish in the Yukon, but go 30 miles off to live, you can't move that much stuff.
And you got to feed those dogs, right?
And you got to feed all the dogs.
You mean like you can't move all that fish?
Can't move the fish.
Yeah.
If you live on the Yukon, that was a resource that people used, but we didn't. And so I wasn't willing to go and try to manage a couple of dog teams. How would we even go along the river, as these guys already ran the banks and the Yukon, we would run them for a while until they got tired and then throw them in a canoe and they would, we could manage it that way. But it just wasn't going to work. And so did
you have no fishing on your river? No char or grayling or?
There were grayling. There were grayling. There were suckers, long-nosed suckers. There were, round whitefish. There were a few species, but you couldn't feed a dog team with them.
Yeah.
You might feed them overnight. In the lower part of the river, there were northern pike, not in the upper part of the river. They didn't go up there. Anyway, we were getting ready to go anyway, and so we just asked for a year leeway from Doyon so that we could come in with a ski plane and move some things and take care of the cabin so it wouldn't be a trash pile at some point. So they granted that to us, and then we went into Fairbanks, and I hadn't worked a job since I was in high school. Well, the milking the cows period, just out of high school, and Karen had she was a full out teacher. She could go into Fairbanks and boom, she's teaching, and I was struggling. What the hell do I do now?
Yeah,
and there was this one log yard, and I thought, well, I do log stuff, and so I walked over there and asked if there was any work, and this guy has these giant logs, that big scribe log houses get built out of, 40, 50 feet long, and dirt and bark and stobs and everything. I'll give you $10 a log for peel them. I'm like, well, that isn't going to even enough to do our rent on a monthly basis or pay for the kids' daycare or whatever,
I had a gig for a while doing those logs, and I feel like it was 30 cents a foot.
Yeah,
is what we would get paid.
Yeah.
That's a miserable job, man.
Yeah, I peeled a lot of logs, and when it's your own, it's just one thing, but peeling them for $10 a log. So then I said I'm going to go to college, and so I went back to college.
Just walked over there.
Yeah, yeah, and so I had 1 semester of credits, and went there and was going to go into biology, because I thought if there's anything I can do, it's some job in biology where they go out in the field and do stuff, because we met people out on the Yukon taking care of peregrines. We met people that were doing fisheries work or forestry work, and we thought I can do that. That would be something
you'd run into professionals out doing their jobs.
That's right. Yeah. And so that's what I did, and my first job was with BLM, a seasonal job. This gal Randy Jant, who was a biologist with BLM, was doing waterfowl brood surveys and wanted to hire somebody to be able to do that, but they had to know the birds, and I knew all the birds, all of the ducks and the geese and everything. You could see them from a mile away flying and know what they were,
Mm-hmm.
And so she took me out to test me around these. There's 2 lakes by the airport when they get a bunch of ducks in the spring, and of course I could identify them all, no problem. And she's going, okay, well, you might work, and they were really nervous because here's this guy, I don't know how old I was, 33 or something like that. And didn't have a job since he was a teenager. It made him a little bit nervous, but they took the chance. And so I was going to college in the winters, and then working for her doing waterfowl brood surveys. I started to do fisheries work with BLM, and finished bachelor's degree in 1996. And one of the guys I had worked with at BLM was running a big project on the Yukon for Fish and Wildlife Service. And I walked into the office and he says, "You're the man I want." And he hired me to work out on salmon down at Rapids, which is down near the mouth of the Tanana River.
Mm-hmm.
Did you kind of did you fall into the fisheries thing, or was that something you were interested in and wanted to hone in on yourself?
That was really opportunistic.
Yeah.
So in my undergraduate work, I had done mammalogy and ornithology, and I did fish biology. There were these different, but I'd also done microbiology and genetics, and I liked them all. Cell biology, I thought that they were all pretty fascinating, and did physics and chemistry and math and everything too. But so I started there, and the first year, we have this big fish wheel running, and we're tagging chum salmon, fall chum salmon, at 450 fish a day, putting these spaghetti tags in them. We were doing a mark recapture project, trying to estimate the population upstream of the Tanana. And while we were catching all of those chum salmon, sheefish were coming through in August and September to the tune of 60 or 80 a day going through the fish wheels.
Can you describe a sheefish for people that don't know what they are?
Sheefish are a great big fish-eating whitefish, and they can be as much as 30, 40 pounds or more, and well over a meter long, and they're a really great fish.
It's like a tarpon and a whitefish had sex.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like that. And
not that I've ever caught one. They've just been described to me.
Yeah. I think that tarpon give a much more profound fight than sheefish do. But sheefish are they're a wonderful fish.
Uh-huh.
And
did when you got into this work and got into school and all that, did the whole time did you know that you were real bright, that you had a book learning ability? I mean, you had to felt so feral and wild, right?
Well, there is that.
but like to come back to it, were you surprised to be like, oh, I can be in these classes and get A's on my tests and write papers?
Well,
or did you feel that was there all along?
I didn't really know. So there were several of my friends that told me there's no way you're going to keep up with these, late teen, early 20s test taking machines,
Yeah.
But I ignored it, and I did just fine.
My dad hung out with this. My dad fought in World War II, and a lot of his buddies were all World War II guys. And there's a guy that lived across our lake and then over this isthmus and across the next lake. And he had been a pilot during World War II, but he was kept in a POW camp. He got shot down, was kept in a POW camp. The famous aviator Charles Lindbergh.
Yeah.
This guy was Charles Lindback. He was telling me that when he got home from the war, he just assumed he'd go to school on the GI Bill. And he said that he went and sat there one time, and right off the bat, he's like, there's no way. And just walked out. Like, couldn't do it. That's what's hard for me to picture, like, that you went off and got, like, undoctrinated and went wild, but then came back and got redoctrinated. Redoctrinated.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I don't know. It was a wild time, but it was really hard to come to grasp the change coming into town, and I struggled for a while trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah, because you're living like kill a rabbit, eat it.
Yeah,
catch something, sell it. Cut a tree down, make a house.
Yeah. So all of a sudden you're playing this
you're playing this like long game, like, oh, if I do this for 4 years, I'll get like a tech position, and then maybe I'll get like a job.
And the things that you have to do in school, right? Where you're like, okay, I know this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But
I
they're
know
making
no
me
one
do
will
it
ever
anyway.
ask me this as long as I live.
Right. Whereas like jump back to last year, if you didn't do what mattered, bad things could have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I imagine just doing homework wasn't necessarily what the challenge or what the irk was, right? Like, what was the biggest thing that you had to come to grips with or face head on when you made the change? Like, just in general in life, like what was it that confronted you that really made it difficult?
That's a good question. I guess. That had been my identity for so long, being out in the woods. Coming in, it was like struggling. And our older boy, he struggled with it too.
Did he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he did. And he just saw himself as being the woods person that he was. And he got over it. Although, he teaches... He teaches applied math at University of Colorado Boulder, right? And on his webpage, it says Jed Brown was born and raised by wolves in the Alaska wilderness. So he encompasses it. He likes it, sure. And likes that was what he did for the first pretty much 8 years of his life. And he and I had gone out sheep hunting and things for several times, and that's all really fun. I guess when I realized that if I'm going to get into a job that I'm going to like, I got to go through the university. Mm-hmm. And once I kind of came to grips with that, I would just go there. I'd just do it, and it wasn't all that hard. It was just, there was time element to it, but.
Was it tough being around people all the time? Going from like not seeing people for months to being around people every single day?
I don't really. That's probably true. That's not something that I remember as an issue, though.
Gotcha.
We did get a place that was kind of by itself, and there was woods around it, And I really liked that. And we had a bird feeder right outside of the this window. And so I would, it was definitely a good place for me because I would come and decompress if there was decompressing to do.
So was it all fisheries research after that first job at the fish wheel?
Yeah. So I got into the honors program as an undergraduate. And in the honors program, I did work out in Coal Bay. I did a small mammal survey following after Murray's work in the 1920s. And that got put into what they call an honors thesis. The honors program paid my way, essentially. They paid my tuition, and which was a good thing. But it also, there were classes you had to take in that were, I don't know, maybe a little more philosophy. And anyway, it was a good thing. And so once I got into that fish job, though, I've had that same job the whole time. I mean, I wasn't hired permanent initially. It was a technician, but the sheefish work. There was a fellow, John Burr, that worked with the Fish and Game Department at the time, and he came by to see us at work down there, and he said, "You guys really should do something with these sheefish. We've been working to try to figure out where they go and where they came from for a long time." And we were doing telemetry work with the chum salmon as well. Not only the spaghetti tagging, but a telemetry program with it. And so we just, with towers that were, up in the drainage, so you could tell when they would swim by these towers, they would get a record. And so that's what I did for my master's degree. And I put out radio transmitters 3 years in a row, and also did that otolith chemistry and was able to show that these fish spawn in this big braided region of the upper Yukon flats, right in the main stem. Nobody had a clue. And then when they were finished in mid-October, they head back down to sea and spend the winters in the estuary or perhaps nearby coastal areas. I don't know.
And no one knew what the hell they did.
Nobody did.
And like in brackish water, like at high saltwater content?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And those that go down there feed all winter. Whereas there was a lot of them since then, telemetry programs with the sheefish, a lot of them just sit in the Yukon. And I have this vision of them with their pectoral fins in the gravel and their mouths open facing upriver and just spending the winter that way.
Not feeding, just
not feeding.
Sitting, dormant.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's one of the papers that I just sent off to a journal. We'll see how they accept it. They send it out to review and everything, but I think it's an important piece because not all the populations do that. Spawning populations of the sheefish. Some of them don't go to sea, and some of them do. And why? Who knows? But that's for somebody else to figure out. But so that's what I did initially for my master's degree, and because I had done otolith chemistry work, the professors up there, anybody else who wanted to go into otolith chemistry would get me tagged to be on their committees, and so I've been on 12 different graduate committees with people doing otolith chemistry work, and I think. Largely because of that, the university gave me an honorary doctorate a few years ago.
Well, that's cool, man.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, I got PhD, so to speak, more or less.
I got another question for you about the living in the bush versus coming into society. When you're out in the bush, like, I'm trying to think of how to put this. Being alive now in today's atmosphere, you become very aware of all the cultural conversations, right? And you become aware of like who you identify as. You're like, okay, I identify as, an American. I identify as a member of my family. I identify as a member of my community, right? when everything's so stripped down like the way it was, and you're not aware of all the like every little thing in the news or every little societal fracture that's going on, every blow of campaigning, like the presidential campaign season, right? Where do you sort of land in terms of what you are or what you identify as? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you feel like well, I'm an American, you know, or like where do you land at what you are? Like, are you a community member of the Yukon? Like what? It's sort of, if someone says like, who are you? Like, what are you? What would you have said?
You mean now?
No. When you were living in the bush, like, what would you have said if someone asked you, sort of like, explain yourself to me? You're a what?
Yeah, it was much more as a resident of the woods.
Yeah.
I remember my brother came and visited me one time, flew in on a ski plane, and we mushed around. It was in the winter, and he said it was during Reagan administration, right? He's going like, how can you sit out here, you know, when the real world, there's so many things going on. And I says, I think this is the real world. That's how I felt. This is the real world. I didn't know that Reagan was president, right? I had no clue.
That's what I'm getting at.
And I didn't care.
Yeah.
It didn't affect you.
No. And I mean, maybe it did, but
it did in a macro way.
Yeah.
Like it did in a macro way, meaning, you know, like oil prices.
Right.
Or, you know, I mean, like these things would come for you.
Yeah.
And,
I didn't
eventually
buy any gas because I didn't have any motors. But yeah.
But, you know, like eventually it would be that you got a letter saying you got to move off the land. And that is, in a macro sense, all this global stuff is impacting you. But that's like, but when you're out there, like that stuff falls away, and you're a guy in the woods.
Yeah,
you're not all pissed off about who's using what bathroom. You're
not even a little bit.
You're a guy in the woods.
Not even a little bit. Yeah, yeah. I've tried to bring it into. I mean, it was definitely a big part of who I am and how I think about things. You know that whole. I don't know, some of the social issues that are so much conflict right now. It's like I don't really care what somebody else does.
Yeah,
you know, I just don't, and or who somebody is. You know, I try to treat people just like people.
Yeah,
men, women, gay or straight, whatever. You know, I don't care. It's not my business. I have a hard enough time taking care of myself. Okay? I'm going to take care of everybody else too, or try to define their problems. I don't think so.
Do you have any regrets about the timeline that you spent? How you spent your life?
Not even a little bit. You know what was weird? All my friends at college, when I said I'm going to leave and I'm going to go and live out in the woods, they're going, "Oh, you can't do that. You got to finish college. You know, you're going to ruin your life and everything." Neither of my parents told me that at all. I don't know what they thought I was getting into, but they didn't discourage me at all. Not even a little bit. And I find that surprising. But
do you still do like field work where you get to go spend extended periods of time like out in the woods? Or
2 falls ago was my last field project.
Yeah.
Over the last few years, I've been losing my central vision. It's a genetic mutation that doesn't usually affect older folks, but it is with me. So I have a hard time right now. I'm not driving. I can't read a book. I can read it on a computer with high contrast and stuff. But that last project, we were fishing for sheefish, and that was big enough I could see it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't drive a boat
right
now, and I wouldn't be the one taking measurements and things like that.
Yeah.
And so my functionality in the field has declined to the point where I'm not going to be going out anymore.
How old are you now?
66. Give me 67 in a couple weeks.
What? Give me a piece of marriage advice.
I don't really know. I treat Karen like a princess.
I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah. and
You
That might
obviously
be where I went wrong. Man.
you started
It's not
out
too
right
late.
with the toilet paper move. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, that's not princess treatment.
and the new cabin.
Oh, that's princess treatment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I just love her to pieces, and always have and always will. Yeah, I don't know.
That's been your attitude.
It's been my attitude. Yeah.
You're not like, well, I'll see next year. I'll see the next year after that how I feel.
No,
That's
no.
good, man. Dude, there's a lot of people that view the world like that, man.
I get it, but
Are there any plans to live in the woods again?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, we kind of live on the outskirts. We have a 40-acre plot of land with nice birch and spruce on it, where the latest cabin, big scribe log place that I built. Let's see. I started that one in my late 40s, finished it in mid 50s. We've been living there for.
Got to let those things settle, you know?
Yeah. So I love it. I love it. It takes a little work to maintain, but got a great big sauna, maybe wood-fired sauna, which he helped get the stove for out of Wasilla.
Okay.
He and his boss went up and picked it up.
you still feeding yourself with
That was my
wild
next question.
fish and
Good
game?
question, yeah.
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah. I went moose hunting this year, but we didn't get anything, which is rare. So my moose hunting adventures have been to go up to that same place where we lived, up on the Candy.
Oh, cool.
And there's just some good lookouts and open country, and you know, when you live in a place for long enough, you know where the moose are crossing, and so we've always seen sometimes several bulls, and we go up. A couple of my buddies and I go up there, and we've never come back without a moose except for this time, and we just never saw a bull.
Do you guys call?
Yeah, we call.
Can you rip a call for me?
Okay, so I have been around when cows call.
So this is a real call.
And it is very similar to a cow, regular dairy cow, bawl. It's a
That's your call.
It's a cow call.
Yeah. You don't do any of that crazy cow calling like.
No, but they do that.
Yeah.
And so if it's a small bull, you want to do a cow call, because a big bull.
Hold on. Hit me with your normal, like, okay, you get out there, you're there. Okay, all right, boys, we're gonna start hunting. Everybody be quiet. You're gonna do what? Hit me with it.
Well, if you're looking for a big bull, you know, it's going to be a grunt.
Ooh. No, I don't mean the bull noise. I mean the cow noise.
I did do it.
That's your main. That's your main cow call that you're using.
That is.
Okay. You never do the big, long, plaintive, like. No,
my buddy does. This guy, Scott McLean, he goes up there. He's got a fiberglass accelerator type thing. And he'll do that and then do a couple of grunts afterwards. And it works too.
But you were saying cow call for small bulls, bull grunt for big bulls.
So if you do a big grunt and it's a small bull, he doesn't want to be anywhere near a big bull.
Yep. Yep.
And if we see a small bull around, we would always do cow calls, and they'll come. And one of the beauties of this particular place is that you can see how these bulls are responding.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be even a mile away, and then you'll see these big antlers turn, and they'll start walking your way. And if you do it too much, they'll go away. And so you just want to let them do their thing.
Yeah, man. Why do you don't worry, we're going to wrap up pretty quick here, but I just got a couple technical questions for you. In your mind, why would a bull walk 2 miles to come and walk like he's just coming? There's nothing in the world's going to stop him. And then all of a sudden he's like, but I'm going to lay down, then walk away.
Lay down for a couple hours, then get up
and then get up and go the other direction. Like, what is in his mind?
Well, I have no idea, to tell you the truth. I think that there are some bulls that get really damaged in fighting.
Oh, okay.
we were watching. There was a big bull and a little bull. Well, kind of a bullwinkle, walking along this one open hillside at one point, and they were not responding to us at all. And the big bull would hit this little bull every once in a while. And finally, the little bull turns around and nails him in the butt with his horns, and then hauls ass across this hill. And we watched them with the big bull after this little bull go over a couple of hills, across a stream, and then up another hill until they disappeared. Yeah. But that little one had to know that he was going to be on the run because that bull was going after him. Yeah. And I think, I mean, we've got them when they're punctured.
So he's coming in and he's like, man, I'm not going in there and fighting. I'm going to linger on the outside and see what's happening.
Or he doesn't hear it again and thinks it may be not there anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to get in their head, man.
I know. But I do know that if you grunt too much or if you call too much,
turns them off.
They're going to turn off, yeah.
You know, you mentioned that little bull hitting that big bull in the ass. Me and Seth last year were messing around with there's a company, Dave Smith Decoys, and he makes a posturing buck. So it's a buck that's kind of all bristled up. And you'll see other bucks come. And you always think when you see bucks fighting, you associate them being antler to antler, nose to nose, of course, right?
Yeah.
Because they're squaring off. But here he is, he's looking at a buck, but the buck doesn't move. So you get to see what he would prefer, how he would prefer to fight in a situation where the buck isn't always facing at him. He would prefer to fight, come in behind it, get alongside of it, and drill it right in the rib cage. Like, that's what he wants to do.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that little bull hitting that little bull in the ass or something like that. Like, I imagine when they can get the jump on each other, they probably do, and that's a way different hit than hitting an antler.
Oh, yeah.
When you're driving those tines into something.
Yeah. Every once in a while, these big bulls will lock their horns together.
You see them get stuck.
Yeah, and I've never seen it in practice, but I've seen those the sets of antlers that are put together. Department of Fish and Game in Fairbanks has one hanging up right over their information thing, and where people come in to get hunting license, fishing license, things like that. And there's also one in Eagle. This helicopter pilot had spotted these two bulls stuck together. It has to be a desperately bad situation for them because any wolf coming around or bear coming around would just start eating.
2-for-1, dude, yeah.
Eat them alive.
Yeah.
You still shooting a 243 when you go moose hunting?
You know what? I changed to a 6.5 Creedmoor. And the reason I did that is so I could shoot copper. Because despite what people's views are with lead in the offal of deer down in California is what almost put California condors over the edge.
Sure, yeah.
And when they found out how that was going down, because they were testing these condors, and they had lead poisoning. But they're eating that stuff where all of that lead fragment is sitting and scavenging all over the mountains there.
And the acid in their guts can break that lead down to where it becomes toxic.
I suppose so.
I think that's what the issue is.
Yeah. But so what I headshot with the 243 was a 100-grain Hornady bullet. And bullets, I think, are everything. And a lot of people say, it's not big enough for Alaska game. They don't know what they're talking about. But that 100-grain Hornady hunting bullet is, it rolls back, it stays together, and usually on a moose, if I shoot it just behind the shoulder, it'll be either in the ribs or the skin on the other side with a lot of bleeding through the lungs. And if you shoot it right in the ear, it'll just shatter that big vertebrae right behind the head. So it's a very good bullet. And I've tried a lot of other bullets like Nosler partition. Mm-hmm. Nosler partition do not work in a 243. And the reason for that is that back part of it doesn't have enough mass by itself. Once it explodes, the front part explodes.
Doesn't carry through.
Mm-hmm. And I shot a couple of caribou with that load. And you have this grapefruit-sized damage on the outside, but it never went into the lungs, and it killed him. But it would not be a good bullet to have. And so right now, though, I wanted to go lead free. And if you go down to copper in a 243, you're down to 80, 85 grains. And I didn't want to go there because there were people out there that shot 22 250s and 70 grain bullets. And they won't break the neck.
Got it.
They will kill a moose, but they're getting down there closer to the edge. And the 243 100 grain that I was using, it would break any bone in the body, no matter what angle you're dealing with. Some people say, well, yeah, but you got to be really precise. You do with anything,
Mm-hmm.
If you gut shoot a moose with a 30-06, it's going to run for a long ways. And so I changed to a 6.5 Creedmoor, same rifle, Winchester Model 70, and but it can shoot a 120 grain copper bullet. I like it.
This is my last question for you.
Yeah.
And maybe the boys got more questions for you too, but how do you feel, what's your general attitude about protections of Anwar, about the proposed Ambler Road,
Pebble Mine,
Pebble Mine, yeah, Pebble Mine. Like, are you with the time you spent and kind of the equity you've built up in that place? Do you encourage that development around job creation, or do you have a view that you just want the wild to stay wild? Like, what's your personal take? As much as you're able to comment on that with your position at work.
Yeah, and sometimes I can't. I was part of the biological team on the EIS for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge for the coastal plain, and one of the big things that's an issue in that, and they put their opinion out. I think it was last week on that, the SEIS that was taking place, but there's no water out there. None of those rivers flow during the winter, and the oil production depends on that water a lot for ice roads, for the drilling, for the camps, everything. So there's a big hurdle for any of these companies to go and develop that, in that they're going to have to figure out how they're going to get water. Mm-hmm. There's 600 meters of permafrost. There's a handful of these perennial springs that come from the south side of the Brooks Range, hit these big fault zones and go down and muscle their way up through there somehow. And so there's this water in certain places that will provide a couple kilometers of habitat, water, that all of the fish in those streams, like the hula hula or the saddle roachet, that have fish in them, all of them are there. And the rest of the river goes dry in the winter.
Got it.
And that's true all across that coastal plain. Where they get water, I have no idea. Some people have thought, well, maybe they'll melt snow. Maybe they'll do a desal plant. Maybe they'll truck it. But, you can't truck water across an ice road. You'll break it up, and then you'll be just continually doing that. So there are some steep hurdles to doing that. But there are, and the last time that there were sales there, it was this development group with Alaska, ADA, that bought most of the plots, and two companies from somewhere else that didn't have any capacity to develop them bought the other two. I think just on a speculation that if one of the big companies decided to go in there, they would have to buy those leases from them or something. And that was what ADA was doing too. ADA can't develop it either. And so it's they've showed from over in Prudhoe that they can develop without the oil without ruining places.
Mm-hmm.
But they got all the water in the world over there. And so I don't know how they're going to do it. No big company bid on the last group. And I think they probably also thought that, okay, this is too fast, and we got to see what happens. And so they have that ability right now. It's opened up for 400,000 acres of lands that companies could bid on. I'm not sure when they're going to do that, but they'll have to figure out. They would only want to bid if they have some sort of thought on how they would go about doing that, how they would get over some of these hurdles.
Because it's money out of pocket right off the bat for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't, because of your involvement, you're not in a position to say like what you hope happens or what you wish would happen, because that would compromise your.
So I don't really see it quite that way, because I'm not a player in whether it should or shouldn't.
Understand.
And the mining is a little bit of a different issue. I wrote a piece in our community perspective for the Fairbanks Daily News Miner on some of the mining prospects around in the interior, and just laid out the dynamics of acid mine drainage and the longevity of it. How far into the future it will continue to have to be taken care of. And the newspaper, and everybody else puts just their name and where they live, and that's what I did, but the news miner looked me up. I mean, I write letters to the editor every once in a while. They know who I am. And they put my affiliation with Fish and Wildlife Service, and I got a little bit of a spanking for that, even though I didn't do it. And I didn't put it on there myself.
Mm-hmm.
But Pebble is one of those that has not been approved.
Yeah.
But they're going to, as long as the minerals are there, somebody's going to come back over and over and over until maybe the politics are right to be able to do it. But that's in Bristol Bay, right? And it's on that pass going over one side down to the Nushagak, great big fish river, the other side down to Lake Iliamna, the biggest of the sockeye runs in all of Bristol Bay. Bristol Bay is booming. It's been booming for a long time. And that is...
I mean, that fishery's booming.
The fishery.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of the hottest fishery in the globe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that Pebble mine is an acid mine, and it would require taking care of for thousands of years. How does that work?
I don't know, so that's pretty young.
I don't know how the hell that works myself. So I wrote a piece, detailing that for the Manh Choh mine. The Manh Choh mine out near Tetlin is also an acid mine, and the state and the tribe and the companies involved have gotten through without having an EIS done, and nobody knew it was an acid mine. And I had gotten some of the documents from somebody that had gotten it through a public records thing and saw that it was, and brought that to light. But they're doing it anyway. And how it'll play out, maybe they can take care of it. They think they can, but it hasn't been looked at from a broader audience. But Tetlin will rue the day they did that if it isn't going to be contained on their end.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. We've got a bunch of them in lower 48 here that are, I call them, oozing sores on the landscape. My geologist friend of mine said he thought that was kind of over the top, but I'm like...
Well, has he been to Berkeley Pit?
I know.
Down the road here?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that one is going to go on.
It'll outlast humanity.
It will.
And that's like an example I always use, right? Because people are like, oh, well, technology's changed so much that you're thinking about this old stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, so the Berkeley Pit, as an example, where like a bird lands on it, it dies.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Is that taken care of in your mind? Like technology has made that okay? Like I don't understand the argument, right?
Well, the state has a policy that if somebody's opening up the earth in an acid mine, that they have to put aside a huge bond that will take care of maintenance on, in perpetuity, they call it. And I don't think that societies are gonna there isn't an investment fund that you could guarantee that it's going to be true for very long. So.
Oh yeah, and that's why like a lot of these companies, they have working permits in the state that they're in, but they're not based there. They're based internationally.
Yeah.
To give them a little more protection, should they just so happen to default on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the way it is in Alaska. Most of these big companies are Canadian or Australian or something. So.
Yeah.
When my kids were real little, I made the mistake one time of explaining to them this idea that the sun will burn out, like the sun's kind of like in its midlife crisis right now, and that there'd be a day when the sun, like, it's not getting recharged.
Yeah.
The sun, like, theoretically will burn out and the solar system will die. And that messed them up because they couldn't picture the geological time I was talking about, So I kept trying to walk it back. Like, well, probably not. Won't really happen, But now I've taken to, now they're older, I'll tell them, I said, man, someday, like, all people are going to be gone. People are going to be gone. And a bunch of time's going to go by, and the earth's going to be full of all these kind of new crazy animals, and it's going to be sweet here. So don't worry about the future.
They're okay. Well, they like that version better.
They like that better than the sun going out.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to grapple with, even as an adult.
When you're talking about these mines, 1,000-year mine, yeah.
But
and then, it's like you're stuck with the contradiction, right? Like, we all got these phones and, titanium fucking coffee mugs when you're camping and shit. It's like, it's a mess, man. Being alive's hard.
Well, that's true. Yeah. There's
being alive.
No perfect situation. Yeah, but the responsibility, the financial responsibility of the public to take care of these places after these mining companies take it. I don't see the oil in the same way. There's other issues with oil, but it's not, poisoning the landscape in that way.
Mm-hmm. No.
So,
man, I appreciate you coming down to talk. My brother was right. Danny was right. I should get you on the show. I think you got to come back again someday, though.
Oh, I got so many questions. We just don't have enough time.
Yeah. What a deal.
So you're going from here to see that boy of yours that you raised up in the woods?
Yeah. I am doing that. His daughters. So his older daughter is Joule, Joule, right?
Joule. Oh, like the vape.
Yeah.
Things. Is that
no, like energy.
It's a measure energy.
Not like
that's
that company that makes
JUUL.
vaping pens.
Some of
his shows where my head's at.
Some of his friends were trying to talk him out of it. Say, oh, she'll have to tell teachers how to spell it and everything like that. And I told him, I think it's a great name, but you may have to pay for it.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah. And then Neve, their younger daughter. She's wonderful, too.
That's a pretty name. How's that spelled?
N-E with an accent, V-E with an accent. So that's a certain kind of snow on high altitudes.
Really?
Wow.
In mountains, yeah.
Sounds like you raised your boy right.
Yeah. I hope so.
Well, man, thanks so much for coming on, man. This has been great.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, there's still a story or two to tell, but
I can tell that, man. You're an interesting guy, man.
Yeah, we didn't even get into like
fish,
any of the
grizzly
shit,
bear, like.
Oh, I want to hear more about the dogs and just weird stuff
having
that you can't
run-ins
explain.
with grizzly bears and
I wanted to get into staying real warm when it's 40 below zero, no tent. But you have to come back.
Yeah, we did that.
Will you come back? Will you come back on the show just for a purely technical questions? Backwoods know-how.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd do it.
Yeah, can we just coordinate it with your next trip down to visit the family?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely do that. Because I got family in Albuquerque, too.
Okay.
And so, one way or another.
Do a little Rocky Mountain loop.
Yeah.
You're going to run the spine of the Rockies all the way to the end.
Yeah. That's what it would be.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Well, the hunting day is over, and it's time to pack it in. Stevie got another, and I got skunked again. But that Rocky Mountain sunset this afternoon was pleasing. But it's my last day in camp, so I'll see you next season. There's nothing like a sunrise over mountains in the fall. And I hear a distant bugle, he's answering my call. And we may see the warden if we give him a reason. But it's my last day in camp, so I'll see you next season. If I draw another, I'll be back here again. And we'll find out in the summer when the lottery comes in. Oh, fingers crossed, my friend. Well, I wish everyone good luck. I'm headed home this evening. 'Cause it's my last day in camp, and I'll see you next